Hey, what's up? My name's Justin. Welcome to 65 Drums. Today we're doing a dedicated deep dive video on the Roland TD17KVX model. If you're interested in the other versions of this drum set, the KL version and the KV version, I've made dedicated videos on those as well, which I'll link in the description below. And if you don't want to waste your time on seeing all three individual videos and you want to see more of like a broad, overview video, I've linked to that one up on the screen somewhere about right there. So let's jump into it, starting off with the prices first, because if we're honest, it always really does come down to the price, doesn't it? So this one costs $1,600. The next step down version costs $1,200, and the base model is $1,000. Is this worth all that extra money? Yes, yes, and yes again. The three main upgrades you'll get over the base model and even the mid-tier model are the better snare, the better ride cymbal, and the better hi-hat. The mid-tier version does have the better snare, but it doesn't have the VH10 hi-hat, which we're going to get into, or that 3-zone ride cymbal. This drum set is just so much better than the other versions, and is really worth saving up for, in my opinion. Okay, so let's do a pad breakdown of all the individual components of this drum set. So starting off with the cymbals, it has two of these guys. This is a Roland CY12C crash cymbal. It's dual zone, so it gives you the bow and edge zones. It's chokeable, and it's also 12 inches across. I have two of these on my drum set behind me, and they work great. They have a natural swinging motion. They're just way better than the CY8 cymbals, even though they're about the same size. As far as ride cymbals go, or you only get one obviously, this is the Roland CY13R. I own this one too, and it's a solid ride cymbal. It's a little bit smaller than I would hope for, but again, this is like their mid-tier model, so it's not going to be, as cool as one of their $4,000 drum sets. You can't really expect that. This one is 13 inches across. It gives you 3 zones. You got bell, bow, and edge. As you can see, by turning it over, you'll actually have 2 cords to plug this into your drum module. Meanwhile, their crash cymbals, they all have one, cable input right here. Now, these cymbals are great additions, or great upgrades over the previous version. My only gripe with the cymbals is that this ride cymbal right here, you have to hit pretty hard on the bell in order for it to be recognized. It's not very sensitive, is what I'm trying to say. Moving on to the hi-hat, this is the real star of the show because this is a brand new hi-hat pad. This is the VH10. And of course, the one thing everyone instantly wants to know is the VH10 the same as the VH11? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it a downgrade? And here's the very simple explanation of the VH10 from my experience and from what the engineers have said in their product unveil that I was at. So number one, as far as feel goes, the VH10 and the VH11, they feel nearly the same to play on. You're not going to really tell a big difference unless you played them side by side. They purposely made it a few ounces lighter, they said, in order to work on cymbal stands that don't have as strong of a spring. So it just moves up and down a little bit easier on the cymbal stand. The hi-hat controller, I did notice that it was a little bit lighter than this one right here. As you can see, the bottom is all metal and it's kind of got some weight to it. The newer one, it felt a little bit lighter. So moving over to the drum pads, you get 3 PDX8 tom pads. These are used as the snare actually on the base model, the TD17KL. They're 10 inches across, but the playing zone is 8 inches across, and that's because it's got the really annoying plastic rim, which again, you will accidentally hit from time to time, and you won't get a triggered sound because it's just the rim. Moving over to the snare, this is one of my favorite elements of this drum set because it's 12 inches across. Even the TD25, it's actually got a 10-inch snare. This one gives you a 12-inch snare. It doesn't give you positional sensing, and even if it did, the drum module is not capable of picking up on that anyway, but it's a very fun snare to play on. It's got a side trigger near where you would play the rim shot, so it's never in the way. You won't have hot spotting with this snare. It's incredibly sensitive, and let me just play you some footage of me testing it. This snare is incredibly fun to play on, and I do need to stress this is a snare drum pad. There's not a really cool drum shell on it like an Alesis Strike or anything. They're just a solid set of pads that do the job. You're getting mesh heads, and they're fun to play on. I'm liking the fact that Roland's actually giving you the 2 crash cymbals and the hi-hat on the stand and a 12-inch snare drum pad, all at $1,600. For the longest time, Roland always held back on those types of features until you paid like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for some reason. Now they're finally giving it to you at a decent price. Moving on to the next pad, we have the Roland TD17. Like I said in previous videos, it's one of the best kick drum pads you can buy as far as like the sub $2,000 range. It feels great to play on. It doesn't have the dead feeling of a rubber pad. It doesn't have the overly bouncy feeling of like a 1-ply or 2-ply mesh pad. It has a great feel to it. You can use a double kick drum pedal with it. The main difference between this one and the previous version, the KD9, is that the KD9 moved around more. This one is more solid. So it has a very similar feel between those two. Okay, so now it's time to talk about the drum module. This is the Roland TD17. Talking about like as far as like the hardware features and what you can do with it, I do like the fact that it has a dedicated ambience knob. You can even go deeper into the ambient sections and change the virtual size of the room, the wall type, and the type of room you're in, stuff like that. Mic placement. I like all of that. It does sound kind of artificial, but at least it's an option, and it does add a little bit of color to your sound. I do like the fact that the module is just easy to use. You can press a tuning button, a muffling button. You can just get around pretty easily. As I've said in other videos, I wish there was a dedicated headphone, master volume, and aux in set of volume knobs, but instead they put in these bass and treble knobs. I don't really think that's a good trade, but it is what it is. Now, 2 important things about this module is that yes, you can split zones, so you can turn 1 crash cymbal into 2 crash cymbals. Of course, they're just gonna be 2 single zone crash cymbals, but you can do that. And also you can layer sounds and import your own samples. So this means you can create a really rich, deep sound, and there's a lot of possibilities here. Now, as you can see with this drum setup right here, you're almost maxed out. You got 1 extra input, and after that, you can't really add any more pads. But you can if you start, splitting the zones. So there's potential to add 3 more crash cymbals that are single zone just from the rim zones of those toms right there. Now, in a second, I'm gonna cut away to some playing footage of this drum module so you can get a feel for what this drum set sounds like. And also, we're gonna discuss whether or not this is better than the Alesis Strike or the Roland TD25. Sound quality is always going to be a contentious subject. As far as live performance, I saw this being played live, and it sounded really darn good out of the right speakers. I also played this with $350 headphones, and it sounded really darn good to me. Not everyone agrees with me though, and that's fine because sound is very subjective. You either like the sounds or you don't. Just listen to some sound examples. Don't buy the kit if you hate the way it sounds. Just as simple as that. I feel like the T17 sounds have a bit more of a richness to them. They do use samples. Roland has always used samples. It's just the way they process them that gives them their Roland sound. Okay, so now on to my favorite part of the video, the comparison section. Is the TD17KVX drum set better than the Alesis Strike? Is it on par with the TD25KV? We're going to start with that one because so many people have been commenting asking me about this. Let's compare it to the TD25K for a second. So as of right now, the TD25K is just an inferior drum set in my opinion because it doesn't have as large components or as many components, and it costs $2,000. Now that could change. I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a price lowering or a rebate option or something that could make it worth buying in the future, but as of right now, the TD25K is just not worth buying. Now the problem is, when you compare the TD17KVX versus the TD25, there's pretty much a $1,000 price difference right here. Is the TD25 worth the extra $1,000? In my opinion, for most people, it's not worth the extra money. Let's look at it. You get a smaller snare on the TD25KV, it's 10 inches across. The new snare over here on the TD17 is 12 inches across. Now, I do know that the TD25 does give you positional sensing for the snare. If that's a big deal to you and you really want the positional sensing, snare and module, then you'll have to go with the TD25. And if you really enjoy the sounds of the TD25 versus the TD17, then obviously you'll want to go with that drum set. But if you're okay with the sounds in the TD17 and you want the larger snare and you want the updated kick drum pad that doesn't move as easily as the one on the TD25, when you take a step back and objectively look at both of these drum sets, the TD17KV is still a great drum set. If you own it, don't feel bad about it. It's a great drum set. If you're about to buy it and you still want it, you can go for it. But I don't really think it's worth the extra $1,000. The TD17KVX is pretty much on par with the TD25KV, but I mean, you get the larger snare and you get the newer sounds on the TD17, so I would go the TD17 route myself. And then finally, I have to tackle this question. Is the TD17KVX better than the Alesis Strike? Now this is very, very unique because with the 25, these two drum sets were nearly identical. With this drum set, the Alesis Strike, it is a complete different beast. Let me run down the pros and cons of that drum set really quick. It has incredible sounds. The sounds inside of the Alesis Strike drum module are its main selling point to me. It has individual faders as well. It's just a great sounding drum module. The load times kind of suck. The really good kits take around 16, 18 seconds to load. That's not actually an exaggeration. You can time it. It's the best sounding drum module with some hiccups. Really nice drum module. The drum pads, they're huge, they look amazing, they're really fun to play on, but they have durability issues. Snare trigger plates inside of Alesis Strike snares are just snapping in half. People are actually proactively trying to tape down the trigger plate in order to try to avoid it snapping in half. It's just the way that they built it. Also, some cymbals are just, going bad. Alesis has been very good about replacing everything. I went to one guy's house where he had the broken snare and then a free replacement snare from Alesis. They're sending out free cymbals. They're sending out replacement, snares and stuff. It's just the durability, questions have got me a little bit worried. The hi-hats as well, the open and closed action and stuff, they don't work quite as well as VH13s or as this VH10. And again, I've gotten a chance to play both drum sets. I've played the Alesis Strike and I've played the TD17KVX. The TD17KVX is a more reliable drum set. It's using tested, time-proven parts that just work. And even though the sounds aren't quite as good as the Alesis Strike, I'll take the TD17KVX because it's just a better overall package as far as durability and just everything that goes into it. Now, I do realize there are quite a few people that watch 65 drums that have an Alesis Strike or an Alesis Strike Pro, and they love their drum set and they swear by it and they say they've never had an issue and it just works great. And I'm not trying to convince you not to like your drum set. I love the Alesis Strike 2. It's fun to play on. It's just there's some issues about it that make me not want to recommend it to most people. The TD17KVX is well priced at $1,600. I can't tell you how many people have, messaged me or emailed me saying, what's a really nice large electronic drum set that sounds good that I can buy? And I've never really had something that I could hand them and say, go buy this. It's the perfect drum set for your church or for your practice basement or for your club. I've never really had a good option to give people around this $1,600 price point. And now we finally have a good drum set. If you're watching this all the way to the end, you're probably someone who's been doing quite a bit of research on this drum set. From what you know so far, do you like the drum set? Do you think it's worth buying? How do you stack this up against the Alesis Strike? Let me know down in the comments below. Big shout out to today's sponsor, Derek Frampton. Thank you so much for supporting 65 Drums over at Patreon. It really means a lot to the channel. Thank you so much. I know you've been watching for years now. Really do appreciate the support. Hope you guys have an amazing day, and I'll see you in a few.